Hello, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for participating. Thank you for the Aapresid Congress to have this new edition here. My name is Lucía Bracco. I am the marketing coordinator in Sumitomo. Sumitomo Chemical is a Japanese company, and as you can see, we reach every country in the world, pretty much. We have a long history. We have several labs and experimental stations, research labs where we do the development of active ingredients, labs where we study each of these active principles to see if they can be authorized, and also experimental stations where we develop all of these products on the field. If we zoom on Latin America, Sumitomo Chemical is present from 2020 with the acquisition of another company. And in Latin America, we are in Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and Argentina. In the case of Brazil, we have an experimental station, high tech, and also a factory, where we carry out the formulations, which are then distributed throughout the region. As you can see, Sumitomo Chemical in Argentina has been here since 2020, and we have launched several different tools. This is a company that, although it is small, it's very, very strong. In fact, it is the fourth biggest company to do with development and innovation in new molecules and formulations. Thinking as the development of molecules, Sumitomo always thinks about innovation and developing new solutions that may help us to solve the current problems in several resistance to herbicides, which is what we will be speaking about today, but also the resistance to fungicides and insecticides. So within that palette, we also have new products. In the case of today, we will be here with Ignacio Dellaferrera. He is a researcher who is an expert in this very complex issue. He will try to approach this from a much more easy perspective. Also, we will present Empera, which is a new PPO herbicide, third generation, where Enrique, who is our expert, will be speaking about this third generation PPO. And last year was the first launch worldwide of this product in Argentina and around the world. Argentina was the first country where it was authorized. And even for Senasa, this was very, very innovative product. This is the second year that we've been on the market with Empera, and we are very happy with it because although it's been around over 10 years of research and development, for the last 5 years we have been developing with researchers. Last year, this went out on the market with experts and producers. We were able to show everybody this new molecule. It is a very interesting project and unique product. And we believe that year on year, this is a tool that will be implemented because it's truly innovative. At the end, we're going to do a QR. It is a contest, and we will do that at our stand, and those are the prizes. Hello, thank you, Lucia. Thank you, everyone, for giving us this space to be able to work on this with the goal of trying to contribute a tool so that we may have an ideal situation and not the horrible situation on the right. We're going to speak especially about the last cases that have been reported. There is about 43 species that are seen as weeds, and out of these there are 24 of these weeds species. This is an extended problem throughout the Argentine rural areas, and I think part of the solution, if the producers are here, because they're interested in something new. The last reports have to do with Amaranthus sidus, palmeri, also who have a resistance to sulfentrazone. And on the grasses side, together with Andres, we have been detecting also resistance to aloxifop echinoclop. This is not a new problem. We've had it for quite a while. 1996, we had the first case. 10 years later, we had the second report. And from 2005, we begin to have a cascade, and every year we have new reports. And from 2010 up until now, we have several reports of resistance to certain mechanisms of action. If we analyze how weeds used to live in our plots, not just resistant ones, we can see that in the measuring from 2010 and before, we had 28 species that were thought. But from then on, we can see that the number of species has gone up to almost 60, over 60. The amount of species that we have to handle became higher. Going back to the resistant biotypes, we will say that the resistant plants are normally in a very low frequency in our plots. And what I do year on year is to select them so that this frequency goes up. This was selected over many years, and it is not visible until at some point I see a different color on a plot, and that's when I begin paying attention. If I don't change the control, when I start seeing these plants that are not controlled, the progression becomes exponential. And that's where, from not seeing anything to seeing a real problem that may encompass the totality of the plot, it's not very long. So the progression in that selection that I do becomes exponential at the last few minutes of selection. That's when I need to adopt new strategies so the situation doesn't get worse. What we do have in the last reports are taken into account. As an example, Amaranthus is resistant to certain inhibitors of ALS, EPSPs, oxinic, PPO, glyphosate, and graminicides. And that makes us think, and we can see here, each hexagon represents an active of a herbicide, and they are grouped in different families. The one we see at the problem at the top is where we found resistance. The one that is to the right are the PPO inhibitors. On the left, we see the oxinic ones. And at the end, we see glyphosate. This big one, this big cross, so that you can understand how the resistance works, I have to think that the resistance is declared specifically to an active within that group. Not all of it will be a cross resistance. This is when I speak about resistance to several actives principles within the same chemical family. So determined resistance are to glyphosate, to 2,4-D, fomefacin, or others. And then this makes it so that we shouldn't consider the whole chemical family in the same way, but we need to know that just some of those active principles have lost efficacy, especially the resistance that was detected to fomesafen. For example, if you evaluate this to other active principles, they can still be useful for other things. You have the blue line that marks the dosage for each of these active ingredients. We see that with fomesafen, you need 8 times the amount to be able to control, and in the other two, we are below the usage dose to be able to control it with epiferinacil and flumisan. If we do this evaluation, and when it comes to Amaranthus palmaria, we see that the sensitivity has been reduced to several of the active ingredients in this family. For sulfentrazone, we need over fomesafen, you need over 8 times the usage dose, and there are some, such as saflufenacil, which are at the threshold. Any external factor may make it so that this fails. But there are others that, although they have reduced their sensitivity, the usage dose is enough to control the species. So this shows that the biotypes detected as resistant doesn't mean that it's all the same. And to expand on active ingredients, and when we detect resistance to sulfenacil, for example, sulfenacil in their different formulations and the different ways to apply it, it's not resistant, but we see at the end with another active with the family of PPO can still be effective with this type of resistance. Just to mention, in the case of echinocloas has been detected as resistant in several species to glyphosate. The most important are Corona and Cruz-Gali. And also, we determined resistance to miazolinone and ACCS. And we are working on resistance to oxyphop and yellow alert in the resistance to clethodim, because it's been used more, so it's increased pressure on the species. This is with echinocloa. And to put this into context, with regards to the reports that we get and an overview in this graph, you can see the evolution on 26 biotypes. These 26 populations are not exactly the same, but I do have populations that are the red lines that are behaving as resistant. I have over the usage dose to control them. I have the green ones that are very, very low, that are still very sensitive to glyphosate. And then I have some of them that are the 4, 5, and 6 on this graph, which are being sensitive still, but they are very much on the threshold of the dosage needed to become resistant. And on the other hand, what we have determined in these populations with different degrees of resistance is that not all populations will share, if the resistance is detected, will be resistant to everything that has been shown before. When we have detected resistance to haloxyphop, some of them are still sensitive to glyphosate. This happened with echinocloa and also with another type of plant. To summarize, what I wanted to say is that not all resistance that are detected on one chemical active ingredient must be translated to the whole group, nor should they be translated to all of the plots. It is a specific thing detected in specific cases. And Now, to try and go a bit beyond, I have to understand that what I am selecting, what I am where I am making it more frequent is not just in the plant that is resistant to a herbicide, but what I am doing is selecting a plant that has a mechanism that makes it less sensitive to certain herbicides. The mechanisms were inherent to the plant, and it is what everybody knows. It can absorb or move the herbicide less, or they can metabolize or detoxify the herbicides that have come into the plant. What we're doing then is accumulating not the resistance itself, but we accumulate mechanisms of resistance. What we accumulate is the fact that certain groups of plant have triple mutation for glyphosate, or they may incorporate some adaptation or gene amplification, or they have the metabolism for the herbicide. Some plants have some combination of these three mechanisms. Let us see, why do I understand this as necessary? Glyphosate in particular, what we have been selecting is resistance, simple resistance, resistance with a mutation mechanism, either in one or several points, reduced absorption or reduced translocation, or accelerated metabolism through GST. All of these mechanisms have been found in plots around our country. And in the case of 2.4D, what we detected is the fact that the biotypes that were found to be resistant can be metabolized part of the herbicide and take it to non-toxic compounds. And in some cases, we could see that the 2.4D moves less inside the plant. This graph also shows that not all the resistance that we find are the same, because each line represents a population. The red ones are the resistant ones, but the difference between the red populations is the degree of resistance. They're all over the usage dose, but one is 2, 3, or 5 times higher than the sensitive population.
We talk about glyphosate, and now we focus on fomesafen. How about the dosages that have a major difference in sensitivity with the biotypes that we considered sensitive? When we look at the metabolism and we try to divide it in the less sensitive species, we see that there is an increase in sensitivity. That is to say that plants with inhibited metabolism recovered certain sensitivity to this substance. And how about the last case, where we saw the plants that have sulfentrazone resistance? The sensitivity is reduced. You can see the resistance index on the screen, and we detected that with very low dosages, we also reduce sensitivity. But the difference between the two behaviors is that even though sensitivity is reduced to a certain degree in both, in the case of sulfentrazone, remember that the dose is 500 milliliters. Applying 2 liters on the field, it was not fully controlling the resistant plants, but with the flumioxazine dose use, it is still effective for this biotype, in particular on the field. We evaluated the same factors as in the previous 3 cases, whether there was any effect of the metabolism In a way, it did have an effect. The metabolism continues to be involved in reducing sensitivity of the plants that behaved resistantly, with resistance to this substance. This mechanism, to make it clear, even though the herbicide penetrates, it is intercepted or captured and degraded to non-toxic species before it has any effective action on the plant. Why is it important to know this? We need to understand that we are selecting the types and the mechanisms within the biotypes. Now, there are other people that also know about this. The metabolic resistance is in charge of creating multiple resistances. There is a mechanism that can lower sensitivity for more than one or to more than one chemical group. I don't mean to scare you. However, I would like to insist producers in Argentina are quite aware of the problems, and we are quite prepared to face them. That is why, even though, well, also, these solutions are quite expensive, so we take care we don't mess it up. And we have to watch out for multiple resistance to 2 to 3 mechanisms. In the US, we have multiple resistance to more than 6 active types. For oleum, we had even 11 active resistances. Now, to conclude and to reinforce the idea I started with, if we consider each of these lines, the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth, you can see the PPO in these species that are not so sensitive. I'm leaving 25% of plants. In this case, 1 out of 4. But imagine if we have a plot of 1 million plants. This would be 250,000 plants. So we need to take care. If I use more elaborate mixes by adding oil or other components, I see 2 plants that, once they grow, can produce seed. I am increasing pressure, but I continue to have descendants with low sensitivity concerns. So, when we have problems, we need to change the strategy or implement zero tolerance so as to avoid increasing the frequency of the less sensitive types. In conclusion, the selection of the right herbicide and the right mix and conditions are fundamental to be able to manage and delay what other colleagues will talk about, the less sensitive biotypes with declared resistances and with herbicides that are on the brink of breaking their efficacy. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you for sharing our session with us. I would like to describe Empera. Empera is a new PPO herbicide with 3 main characteristics: rapid action, control for broad leaves and also grasses, and the systemic aspects of the product also set it apart. It is part of the 14 group of the N-phenyldiamines, and we will see the evolution of the different PPOs and how they were launched. Rapidicil is the trade name, and it has the 3 benzene rings closed. And these are the three things we are going to focus on. When we talk about different types of herbicides, we traditionally have two groups. One is the contact herbicide, and the other one is the systemic herbicides. And this is how we differentiated them. But today, with the launch of Empera, this premise is no longer true. We also used to say that the more rapid the control of herbs, we wanted to wait to see the reshoots. But this product also makes this statement false. Along the same line, we have always considered PPO herbicides did not have a good control of amaranthus in post-emergence. When we needed to control this herb, we started using different mixes, not just PPO herbicides. We added other active principles because we knew that the control would not be effective. But now Empera has rendered this statement also false, and we will see why. And finally, one of the big advantages of Empera, it demystifies the fact that PPO herbicides do not control narrow leaf grasses. Now we have a product that controls both broadleaf and narrow leaf grasses at the same time. To delve into the topic of amaranthus, and we always talked about the importance of systemic approaches. When we have amaranthus with small sizes, we can see many different points of growth, which increase exponentially as the plant grows in size. What is this growth point? It is a potential reshooting when there is a failed attempt to control. There are gems that will reactivate and new shoots will emerge. Why is it important to have this systemic approach? We have carried out simple tests. We covered the upper leaves of plants. We covered the lower leaves, and we did different applications so as to evaluate whether the product was transferred to those sectors. We did a test with UTC compared with epirifesanil and paraquat, and we compared this. We have this on our booth. You will be able to see this live. We can also have a discussion and a demo, and we can have a Q&A if you come by our booth. When we cover the new leaves, that is to say, the top leaves of the plant, this is what happened with Empera. The product moved from the basis of the plant to the top. In paraquat, the lower part, well, the product only burned the part or destroyed the part that it touched and not the entire plant. But when we applied only to the upper part, the upper leaves, for paraquat, the product did not have a systemic effect. But for Empera, the product moved from the top to the bottom of the plant. That is why we have a burning solution that moves to other parts of the plant, and not just the part where it is applied. In the same way, when we have Empera plus glyphosate, the same thing happened. When we compared it with saflufenacil plus glyphosate, only one portion was burned. But this was not the case with Empera, where the entire plant was burned. And conversely, when we applied on the upper part, Well, only the upper part of the plant was burned with the other solution, but with our solution with Empera, the entire plant was burned. Well, why do we use Empera for amaranthus? Because of the importance of the systemic approach. These are contact herbicides. We are comparing contact herbicides with saflufenacil with a systemic herbicide with Empera. We can reach the entire plant even though the product does not come into touch with all parts of the plant. It is transferred within the plant. I also told you that it shows rapid action. How can we demonstrate this? I have divided this into two parts. On the one hand, the speed when we have the speed of penetration, and we apply at different intervals, and we also use rain, an induced rain. We see how the product penetrates the plant. On the left, we have the sample, and the sample was a resistant population. When it was applied without rain, it was controlled. But when we applied Empera 5 minutes later, we achieved the same level of control as if we didn't have rain. So we have different cases. We have simulated rain. Saflufenacil, you have very bad control. After 4 hours, or 4 hours was the time needed for the product to penetrate the plant and have a similar control. We have much faster action with Empera. The grasses require more time, but for Empera, between 30 minutes and 4 hours was the time needed. But for paraquat, we had to wait 4 hours, and control was not so effective. So Empera and amaranthus control. We are fully convinced that we have a new standard for weed control, and we can see it here, comparing Empera with saflufenacil or saflufenacil plus trifludimoxin. It is a compelling case in favor of Empera. As we did not have PPO for the control of grasses, for Eulesine indica, we used these combinations. The application of Empera demonstrated effectiveness, without a doubt. And here we have different situations: amaranthus, urocloa, chloris, maize. We are trying to broaden the application to voluntary maize. It provides an opportunity because we will be able to apply it when maize has 2, 3, or 4 leaves. The product moves inside the plant compared to other products that burn and enable reshoots. Well, this will be permanent control. It will be different. It gives us a window of flexibility which is quite broad to control effectively these weeds. In case of sorghum, which is a perennial plant, Empera will control the aerial part. If it has rhizomes, depending on the size of the plant, there will be reshoots or regrowths, but we are working on mixes of Empera and other substances so as to handle these situations with a single product. You can also mix Empera with other products. Obviously, with Empera, we have conducted more than 500 studies, more than 1,000 studies in Brazil, more than 1,000 studies in the US with different products, burning products, residual products, and there is no incompatibility. So you can also try your own mixes. Now, this is the soybean. This was a very good niche on the second year after launch, where the product showed its virtues. When we harvest wheat, we have to do rapid sowing. There is no time to waste. In recent years, we have seen wheat that does not have good coverage, that it enables the light to go through. And this gives an opportunity for weeds to expand. When we have harvest time, we have amaranthus. We need a product that will burn fast, that has no restrictions, and we need to be reassured that the control has been effective, because if we cannot control it before sowing, we will have higher costs and deficiencies. Empera has demonstrated that it controlled grasses, amaranthus, and it enabled or reassured producers or growers. Continuing with Ignacio's statements, we see other samples which were not effective. We have the control samples with the different combinations. You can see how it works in these pictures. You can see in the other solutions how growth continues, but Empera, when it is effectively applied, it provides true control. We also did another study in ryegrass. We were able to see different populations. We applied glyphosate, clethodim plus glyphosate. We have seen an improvement, but the application of Empera with clethodim and glyphosate was very compelling in these populations that are very difficult to handle. Now, the control speed. I showed you Empera's speed. In 5 minutes, it penetrates the plant. And we are going to see a video. You can also find it on our social media. We have tried to disseminate this. And we are going to see what goes on with Empera during the first 7 hours. You will see treatment with the glyphosate only, another one with Empera in amaranthus and in another variety.
Solo 7 horas.
In just 7 hours, and this is what happened. Did you observe how the product actually has works at very, very fast speed? And so we can show you 21 days glyphosate after 7 hours. We won't see any change, but after 21 days, you can see with Empera how that works so fast. Lucia told you that we were the first country to launch Empera. That was a landmark for all of us because mostly these products are launched in the States or in Europe, and through the years they come to our region. And we were the first country in the world to launch Empera. and I was working on this since 2019 in micro plots. I was able to see the development firsthand, but I wanted to see it out in the field, and for me it was a great joy. We had excellent feedback to see plots that have this level of total death of these plants without any regrowth. Was fantastic. And I want to close my intervention here with an overview of what we've been speaking about. We always speak a bit about the cost of beginning at a disadvantage. When you are in a fallow, you always close to sowing time, and when we have these type of weeds that are resistant, we waste a lot of water. We are beginning to leave plants that will generate seeds if we don't control them properly. And the sowing is very much limited because we have to solve a problem fast in an effective way so we can sow as quickly as possible. And what happens generally when we have that fallow and we can't control it properly, there are consequences. On the one hand, the growth is not so uniform. There's no uniformity. The sowing, when there's a lot of weeds, they can't work properly. You have these gaps, and that means that during the sowing there will be more resistant weeds and it will become uncontrollable. We also begin to have a great competition to our crop, and of course the losses for yield are definitive. I once heard someone say the following. They said there's the best thing for the best herbicide is to have a crop that is well implanted, that is clean from the beginning, because otherwise there is competition of resources for water, for organic matter in the soil, etc. So to have a well implanted crop is key. And Empera brings us the advantage to add a product and to have a new standard of control, so we can be certain that that control before sowing will be effective. There will be no regrowth, it will be quick, it will be able to control amaranthus and also grasses, and we will be able to begin free of weeds so that we may have a better yield later on. And what we said, Empera is your starting point and your finishing point of the weeds. These are the messages. I'm sure there are certain queries. We are at our stand to be able to talk to you, so you can come with any queries. And I thank you once again for having filled this room to capacity. Thank you so much.
Bueno.
Thank you very much, Ignacio, Enrique. We will now go to the QR. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but we will answer them later on the stand, and we invite you to get to see the result of Empera live in all of the pots that Kike has just shown, which are at our stand right now, so you can get to see them. Thank you.